This video is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc. with free weekly content and free shipping on orders over $150. You can save 5% site-wide by using the promo code MTGMudsta. I'm also sponsored by Face to Face Games, Canada's premier Magic the Gathering store. Using the promo code MTGMudsta will get you 5% off site-wide, with eligible orders getting free shipping Canada-wide. If you're looking for a direct way to help the channel, please consider joining my Patreon and becoming a member of the generic Goblin Gang. Hey gang, and welcome back. Max is bringing his Milling Horror Tribal deck with Captain Angathrod, keeping Path of Ancestry, Wharf Infiltrator, Darkwater Catacombs, Exotic Orchard, Herald's Horn, and Endless Evil. MJ has built Be'lakor, focusing primarily on demons, keeping 2 mountains, Path of Ancestry, Fabled Passage, Badlands, Talisman of Indulgence, and Reflections of Littjara. I am playing Prossh the Pure, Prossh the Perfect, and just Prossh, keeping Nature's Lore, Verdant Catacombs, Cinder Glade, Skyshroud Claim, and Green Sun Zenith. Nick is playing his Nadaar deck and he wants to venture into someone's dungeon, keeping War Room, Castle Ardenvale, Plains, Thraben Inspector, Treasure Map, Akroma's Will, and Oketra's Monument. Max wins the die roll and starts us off. He plays a tap Path of Ancestry. MJ draws and plays a Path of Ancestry as well. I just play a tap Cinder Glade. Nick's got the only untapped land with a Plains and casts a Thraben Inspector, making a clue token. Max plays an Exotic Orchard and casts a Wharf Infiltrator. He gets to scry 1 from using the path and passes after that. MJ plays a Mountain and taps 2 for Talisman of Indulgence. I draw and play a Verdant Catacombs. I announce I'll shortcut, playing Nature's Lore and sacrificing the fetch, losing a total of 3 to find a shock land and a land with a Nature's Lore. Nick has Castle Ardenvale come in and pays 2 for a treasure map. He passes after that. Max plays a Darkwater Catacombs and swings the Infiltrator at me. He draws and discards, and then plays out Herald's Horn in his second main phase. MJ just draws, plays an island, and passes. My main phase has me casting a Green Sun Zenith and putting 2 into the X. I go into my library to find a Bloom Tender, put it to the field, and then shuffle Green Sun Zenith into my library and pass. Nick's turn has him drawing and playing a tap Myriad Landscape. He passes after that. Max looks at his top card, but it's not a horror, and just draws it. He goes at me with the Infiltrator again, connecting, and then drawing a card and discarding a card. He pitches a Dimir Aqueduct, and then plays a tap Myriad Landscape. MJ's got a Mountain for turn, and taps out completely, casting Reflections of Littjara. They name demons and pass. I draw and tap all of my lands and the Bloom Tender to cast a Skyshroud Claim. I go into my library, grabbing the original duels of Taiga and Bayou, putting them to the field untapped, and then pass. During my end step, Nick uses his treasure map to scry 1 and puts a counter onto the treasure map. Nick plays a Plains and taps 3 for Nadaar. While it's still in the stack, Max flashes out an Aboleth Spawn, which will have Max and Nick venturing as Nadaar enters the battlefield. They both decide to go to the Lost Mine of Phandelver, scrying 1. They both also decide to bottom their top cards. Nick then passes turn. Max once more draws his non-horror card after looking at it with the Horn trigger. He casts Soul Ring and then plays out a Clearwater Pathway. And then casts Endless Evil onto the Aboleth Spawn. He then goes at me with the Infiltrator again, dealing 1 and drawing a card and pitching a Sunken Hollow. MJ plays a Badlands for turn, and then pays 6 for Harvester of Souls. They get a scry trigger from the path as they cast it, and then get a second copy of the Harvester from the Reflections. They pass after that. I draw and play a Reflecting Pool. I then tap my lands to cast Prossh. With my on-cast trigger, I get 6 Kobolds of Care Keep, and then just pass after that. During my end step, Nick once more activates the treasure map to scry 1 and adds a second counter to it, while Max uses this as a chance to sacrifice his Myriad Landscape but gets confused and bins the Soul Ring instead of the land and goes to find 2 islands. Nick draws for turn and plays a War Room as his land drop and then goes to combat. Nadaar goes at Max and he gets to venture again, going into the mine tunnels and making a treasure. Max decides not to block, taking the 3, and Nick passes. Max still can't hit a horror with his horn trigger and draws. He's got one in the command zone at least, casting his commander, Captain Angathrod, and scries 1 from the path trigger. Moving to combat, he goes at MJ with the Infiltrator, and as it connects, mills them for 1. Max also remembers at this point he should have gained a token from the Endless Evil trigger of the Aboleth. He passes after that. MJ has a Blasphemous Act in their main phase, needing only pay 1 red because the board is just swamped with creatures. We count up the creatures we have, and this has MJ drawing a total of 7 cards apiece from each of their harvesters for a total of 14. Once that's done, they cast a Soul Ring, and then cast Clever Impersonator, having it come in as a copy of the Reflections. They then play a tapped Crumbling Necropolis, and Nick decides to use his treasure map to scry while MJ passes. This will cause the map to transform after he's done scrying, making him 3 treasures as it becomes Treasure Cove. My turn is super quick as I cast Wood Elves, and I announce I'll find a basic forest so that I can shortcut playing out a Parallel Lies before searching. I then pass as I go search for the basic. During my end step, Nick cracks his clue token and draws a card. Nick untaps and draws. He pays 6 mana for a Sun Titan, bringing back Nadaar, which he'd put into his graveyard, who enters and he gets to venture again. He goes into the room to have everyone lose a life, and he gains 1. And Nick then sacrifices a treasure to the Treasure Cove, drawing a card. He then sacrifices his 3 remaining treasures to cast Savine's Reclamation, and this has him bringing back Myriad Landscape, which comes in tapped. He passes after that. Max draws and recasts his commander. He scries 1 from the path trigger, leaving it on top and passing. MJ plays an island for turn, and then casts a pink horror. This has them getting 2 extra token copies from the Reflections, and they then play out an Aspiring Champion, which isn't actually a demon. I untap and draw. I pay 7 mana for an Avenger of Zendikar, one of the classic green bombs in EDH, making 14 plant tokens. I pass after I'm done that. Nick draws for turn, and pays 3 in his main phase for a Mimic Vat, which to me suggests a board wipe's coming. He swings Nadaar at Max, and the Sun Titan at me. The Sun Titan attacking brings back the Thraben Inspector, making Nick a clue token as it enters. Nick also gets to complete his dungeon, drawing a card, and Nadaar is now triggered, pumping his board by +1/+1. Max blocks Nadaar with his commander, taking him out, and I chump Sun Titan with my Wood Elves. Nick puts Nadaar back into the graveyard though, and in his post-combat main phase, we see a Search the Premises. He then brings out Ranger's Hawk and passes, keeping 2 mana open. Max plays an island, but is pretty scared. He casts the Haunted One before going at me with his commander, who I stop with some plant tokens. Moving to his second main phase, he casts a Nemesis of Reason, scrying 1 from his Path of Ancestry. He then passes to MJ. MJ untaps and asks if they should go for the spicy play or the safe play. I'm pretty sure we're not watching this channel for the safe play. And they tap enough mana for an extractor demon, making 2 token copies of it as they cast it. That means whenever something dies or leaves the battlefield, someone is going to get milled for 6 cards. MJ then cycles a Degree of Pain, which is just brutal for the aforementioned reason. They have max mill cards in intervals of 2, and with the remaining triggers not needed to mill Max out completely, since he's only got 77 cards left, they put them on me to mill me for 6. They then draw a card from the cycle, and MJ goes to combat. They hit me with the Aspiring Champion, dealing 1. They get to sacrifice it from its own ability after connecting, and the Excavators mill me for another 6. And Nick decides to have the champion get exiled under Mimic Vat as it dies. MJ then reveals off the top until they hit a creature, which is easy since it's the first card. It's a Plague Drone, which thankfully they put to field and don't cast, so they don't get the copies from the reflections. MJ then passes after that. I draw and play a Phyrexian Tower. I recast Prossh, having not learned my lessons about making tokens, and get 8 tokens from casting it, which becomes 16 because of parallel lives. I then pass to Nick. Nick draws.
Don't have a good answer to this.
Neither do I.
Our main option at this point is player removal, and Nick cracks his clue to draw a card. He then casts a Hedron Archive, and goes at max with Sun Titan. Nick brings back Nadaar, venturing into Phandelver again, and scrying 1. And Max decides to block the Sun Titan with the Nemesis. The Nemesis dies, which has MJ milling me for 6. Max untaps, and on his upkeep, pays to bring back his Drownyard Temple, then immediately loses as he fails to draw a card. MJ draws and plays a Mountain, while Max goes to console himself with some peanut M&Ms. MJ then taps enough for Be'lakor in their main phase, and gets 2 token copies that will resolve one after each other. This will have MJ losing a total of 8 and drawing 8 3 times, for a total of 24 life loss for 24 cards. The first token sees the second token coming in, which MJ has to sacrifice to the legendary rule, but still gets the Lord of Torment ability, and the Be'lakor token takes out Prossh. The actual copy then comes in, and MJ keeps it alive, but triggers the second copy, taking out the Avenger with the Lord of Torment ability as well. That's 2 more death triggers, milling me for 12. MJ then casts a Mandate of Abaddon, both triggering and targeting the pink horrors with it. The horror triggers deal 6 damage to Sun Titan, which has Nick putting it under the Mimic Vat as it dies. This gives MJ even more mill triggers, and then a bunch more mill triggers as the rest of the creatures are dying. They start off by milling me out because we're not sure if I still have Nulamog in the deck. And sadly we learn I've replaced it. After I'm milled out completely, Nick is pretty sure he's dead either way, and scoops it up rather than get beaten down or milled out by demons. Game review time. So unfortunately mulliganing down to 5 is never what you want to do. I had ramp and was hoping to draw into some pieces, plus having Prossh in the command zone usually means I have a decent threat if I need it. Unfortunately, the deck is built around making tokens, which as you saw, worked really in MJ's favor. I didn't know what to expect from Be'lakor other than just decent ETB, withdraw, and damage going off at people. But my goodness was I wrong. That Reflections of Littjara is easily one of my favorite cards in the last couple of years, and seeing it do so much work, not to mention doubled, just made my little token-loving heart beat faster. Nick was able to hit almost all of his land drops, not to mention draw a decent amount of cards, considering he was in mono white. I think venturing in mono white is actually quite good, as it can provide you with land drops to hands, scrying, and other mechanics that white typically misses. I think Max struggled the most out of all of us, especially after that board wipe. He just really wasn't able to do much other than ramp, and the few horror cards that he had out didn't do a ton of damage, so it meant he wasn't milling people very much. This video wouldn't be possible without the help from my sponsors, Cool Stuff Inc., Multizone, Original Magic Art, and Alter Sleeves. But it definitely wouldn't be possible without the help from you, the viewers, and my patrons. So I just want to say thank you for watching, and to remember, friends are just opponents you haven't eliminated yet.